I grew up in a town where football wasn't just a sport, it was a religion. Every Friday night, the stadium lights would come on, and it felt like the whole world was watching. My father worked at the steel mill. My mother was a nurse at the county hospital. We lived in a small house on the east side of town, the kind of neighborhood where people kept their lawns neat, but their cars were always 10 years old. We weren't poor exactly. We had food on the table, clothes that fit, a roof that didn't leak, but we also didn't have extras. I fell in love with football when I was 7 years old. My father took me to a high school game, and I watched these giants move across the field like they were part of some ancient ritual. The way they collided, the way the crowd roared, the way even grown men stood up and screamed, it all felt important, meaningful, like it mattered in a way that most things didn't. I started playing in a youth league. My parents scraped together the registration fee, bought me second-hand equipment from a garage sale. My cleats were too big at first, so my mother stuffed newspaper in the toes. I didn't care. I wore those cleats like they were made of gold. I wasn't the biggest kid, but I was fast, really fast. And I had something else. I could read the game. I don't know how to explain it except that when I was on the field, everything slowed down. I could see where the play was going before it happened. I could feel the gaps in the defense like they were calling my name. By the time I was in 8th grade, people were already talking about me. The high school coaches would come to our games, standing on the sidelines with their arms crossed, clipboards in hand. I knew they were watching. I knew I was being evaluated. And I worked harder than anyone else because I understood something fundamental. This was my way out. Not out of my town necessarily, but out of being invisible. Out of being the kid whose father smelled like metal and grease, whose mother wore scrubs with cartoon characters on them, who lived in a house that needed painting. Football could make me matter. When I started high school, I was ready. I'd spent the entire summer running. Not just regular running, I'd created a whole program for myself based on articles I'd found online. Sprints, endurance work, agility drills in my backyard. My father had helped me build a simple sled out of an old tire and some rope. I'd drag it up and down our street until my legs felt like they were going to collapse. The first day of practice, I showed up early. I was wearing the same cleats I'd had since 7th grade. They were worn down, the white parts yellowed. One of the laces was a replacement from a different pair, but they fit me perfectly now. They felt like part of my feet. Coach Frank Wilson ran this football program at Lincoln High School. He was in his late 40s, built like he'd played offensive line in college, which he had. Everyone knew his story. Full scholarship to a Division I school, injured his junior year, came back home to teach and coach. He was one of those men who seemed larger than life, who could walk into a room and immediately own it. That first practice, he had us run drills. Simple stuff. 40-yard dashes, cone drills, catching exercises. I knew I was doing well. I could feel it. When I ran, I felt like I was floating. When they threw me the ball, I caught it. Every time. But I noticed something. Coach Wilson wasn't watching me the way I thought he would. His attention kept drifting to certain players. Edward Moore, whose father owned 3 car dealerships in the county. Dylan Garcia, whose mother was on the school board. Henry Taylor, whose family had money. The kind of money where they took ski vacations and had a boat at the lake. These weren't bad players. They were decent, but they weren't better than me. I knew it. In some of the drills, they weren't even close. After that first week, they posted the depth chart outside the locker room. I was listed as second string, behind Edward Moore. I told myself it was fine. It was early. I'd prove myself. I just needed to work harder. I worked harder. I stayed after practice, ran extra drills, watched film of our games from the previous year. I studied the playbook until I could recite it in my sleep. When we scrimmaged, I made plays, good plays, plays that made the other coaches nod and write things down. But when Friday night came, I was on the bench. Edward started. He was fine. He made a few catches, ran decent routes. We won the game, but barely. I played in the fourth quarter when we were already ahead by 2 touchdowns. I caught 3 passes, one for a 30-yard gain that set up our final score. In the locker room after, I thought Coach Wilson might say something, acknowledge what I'd done. He didn't. He congratulated Edward on a solid game, talked about our offensive line, mentioned our quarterback's decision-making. I went home that night and lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. My father had been at the game. He'd left work early, showed up in his mill clothes, sat in the bleachers by himself. After the game, he'd found me outside the locker room. "You looked good out there," he said. "Real good. Your time's coming." I wanted to believe him. The second game, same thing. Third game, same thing. I was getting maybe 10, 15 snaps a game, always in garbage time, always when the outcome was already decided. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Some of the other second-string players started talking about it in whispers. Joseph Brown, a linebacker whose family situation was a lot like mine, pulled me aside one day after practice. "You know why you're not starting, right?" he said. "Because Edward's a senior," I said. "Because he's got experience." Joseph shook his head. "Look at who's starting. Really look." I did. The starting lineup was almost entirely made up of kids whose parents were doctors, lawyers, business owners, the kind of people who donated to the booster club, who showed up to fundraisers, who had their names on plaques in the school gymnasium. "It's not about who can play," Joseph said quietly. "It's about who matters to people who matter." I didn't want to believe him. It felt too simple, too unfair, too much like the kind of thing people said when they just wanted an excuse for not being good enough. So I kept working. I kept proving myself. Every single day. 6 games into the season, we were 4-2. Edward had been okay, not great. We were winning, but not because of him. We had a strong defense, a decent running game, but our passing attack was mediocre. During practice that week, Coach Wilson pulled me aside. For a moment, I thought this was it. This was when he'd tell me I had earned a starting spot, that he'd seen my work ethic, that I deserved a real chance. "Calvin," he said. He was the only person who called me by my full name. Everyone else called me Cal. "I want to talk to you about your equipment." "My equipment?" "Your cleats," he said, looking down at my feet. "They're pretty worn out." "They work fine, Coach. I don't have any problems with them." He nodded slowly. "I'm sure they work, but this is a high-level program. We represent the school. There's a certain standard we try to maintain." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Are you saying my cleats aren't good enough?" "I'm saying that when college scouts come to games, they notice everything. The way you carry yourself, the way you look, the equipment you're using, it sends a message." "What message do my cleats send?" He smiled, but it wasn't warm. "That you're not quite ready for this level. That maybe you don't take it seriously enough to invest in proper equipment." "My parents can't afford new cleats right now," I said. The words felt like they were scraping my throat on the way out. "I understand," he said, "and that's tough. But the thing is, Calvin, football at this level requires sacrifice. Everyone makes sacrifices. Some kids sacrifice their time, their bodies. Some families sacrifice financially. It's all part of the program." I stood there, not knowing what to say. "I'll tell you what," Coach Wilson continued. "I'm keeping you second string for now, But I want you to think about what I said, about investment, about showing that you're really committed. Because right now, when I look at you, I see a kid who wants it, but isn't willing to do what it takes to get it." He patted me on the shoulder and walked away. I went home that night and looked at new cleats online. The ones the starting players wore, the brand names, the models endorsed by professional athletes, cost between $150 and $300. That was more than my family spent on groceries in a week. I asked my mother about it carefully, not wanting to make her feel bad. She was sitting at the kitchen table, going through bills. "Mom, do you think maybe for my birthday we could get new cleats?" My birthday was 4 months away. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her face I'd never wanted to see. Shame. Not at me, but at herself, at our situation. "Honey, I can try," she said. "But right now, with your father's hours being cut, I don't know, maybe by Christmas." "It's okay," I said quickly. "The ones I have are fine. Coach was just mentioning it." But it wasn't okay, because the next game I barely played at all. And when I did get in, I could feel Coach Wilson watching my feet, watching those worn-down cleats with the mismatched laces. 8th game of the season, Edward got hurt. Nothing serious, twisted ankle in the first quarter, but he couldn't put weight on it, couldn't run. Coach Wilson looked down the bench. I stood up, ready. He pointed to Dylan Garcia. Dylan wasn't even the third-string receiver. He was a defensive back who sometimes practiced with the offense. But he had the right shoes, the right parents, the right last name. I sat back down. We lost that game. Dylan dropped 3 passes, ran the wrong route twice. After the game, in the locker room, Coach Wilson didn't single anyone out. He just said we needed to come together as a team and remember what we're playing for. I sat in front of my locker, still in my uniform, and I felt something crack inside me. Not break, crack. Like ice that's starting to give way. Joseph sat down next to me. "You okay?" "Yeah, you're not." I looked at him. "What am I supposed to do? Work harder? I'm already doing everything right. I'm faster than Edward. I run better routes. I catch better. I know the playbook better. What else is there?" Joseph was quiet for a moment. "You could buy the right cleats." "Is that what it takes?" He shrugged. "I don't know, man. But I know this. Coach Wilson is never going to start you. Not because you're not good enough, because you don't fit what he thinks this team should look like." That night, I did something I'd never done before. I asked my father for money, real money, money we didn't have. He was in the garage, working on the lawnmower. I stood in the doorway, trying to find the words. "Dad, I need new cleats." He looked up. "What's wrong with the ones you got?" "Coach says he says they don't look right, that scouts are going to judge me based on my equipment." My father set down his wrench. He was quiet for a long time. "How much?" $200, maybe a little more." I watched his face. He was doing math in his head. Bill math, sacrifice math. "I can pick up some overtime," he said finally. "Next paycheck will get you those cleats." "Dad, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do," he said. "Because if that's what it takes for my son to get what he's earned, then that's what we'll do." 2 weeks later, I had new cleats, top of the line. The same model Edward wore, the same ones Dylan had. They cost $240, and I knew that money had come from somewhere important. Maybe it was supposed to be for fixing the car, or replacing the water heater, or something else we actually needed. I wore them to practice on Monday. They felt stiff, uncomfortable. They weren't broken in, but they looked right. They looked like they belonged on a starting player, Coach Wilson noticed. He nodded at me as I ran past during warm-ups. "Good to see you taking things seriously, Calvin." That Friday, Edward was healthy enough to start. I was back on the bench, but now I was on the bench wearing $240 cleats. We won. Edward had an okay game. I played in the fourth quarter, caught 2 passes. In the locker room after, I sat in front of my locker and looked at those cleats. They were perfect, clean, expensive. Everything Coach Wilson had said I needed, and they hadn't changed a single thing. That was when I understood. The cleats were never the point. The equipment, the investment, the commitment. None of it had ever been about football. It had been about proving that I knew my place, that I would spend money my family didn't have to chase something I was never going to get. It had been about teaching me a lesson. Raymond Nelson, one of our offensive linemen and one of the few starting players who came from a family like mine, caught me as I was leaving. "Hey Cal, nice shoes." There was something in his voice, not quite mockery but close. "Yeah. Did it work? What do you think?" He nodded. "My dad bought me a custom mouthguard last year. Coach said it showed I was serious about protecting myself, about being smart. Cost $70. I thought maybe it would change things." "Did it?" "I'm starting," Raymond said. "But I was always going to start. We needed an O-line, and I'm 6'3" and 280. You know why I'm really starting?" "Why?" "Because they can't win without me. That's the only thing that matters to Coach Wilson. Can he win without you? If the answer is yes, even if it's barely yes, then you don't matter." He walked away, and I stood there in the parking lot, holding my equipment bag, wearing cleats that cost more than my family could afford. The next practice, I made a decision. I stopped trying to impress Coach Wilson. I stopped staying late, stopped asking for feedback, stopped running extra drills. I did exactly what was required and nothing more. Some of the assistant coaches noticed. Coach Walter Lee, who worked with the receivers, pulled me aside. "Everything okay, Cal? You seem a little checked out." "I'm fine, Coach." "You're still working hard in practice, but you don't have that same fire. Did something happen?" I looked at him. He seemed genuinely concerned. He was one of the younger coaches, maybe late 20s, and he'd always been decent to me. "Can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm good enough to start?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "I think you're talented," he said carefully. "I think you've got potential." "That's not what I asked," he sighed. "It's not my call, Cal. Coach Wilson makes those decisions." "But if it was your call?" Another hesitation. "The game is about more than just talent. It's about leadership, experience, team chemistry." "Coach Lee, with respect, that's bullshit." His eyes widened slightly. I'd never talked to a coach like that before. "I'm faster than Edward. I run better routes. I catch better. I know the playbook better. The only thing he has that I don't is parents who donate to the booster club and cleats that didn't come from a garage sale. Oh wait, I have the cleats now, so what else is missing? What else do I need to buy?" Coach Lee looked uncomfortable. "Calvin, I understand you're frustrated." "I'm not frustrated," I said. "I'm clear. For the first time since I started playing here, I'm actually clear about how this works." I walked away before he could respond. The season ended. We made the playoffs, lost in the second round. I played sparingly, caught a total of 8 passes over the entire season. Edward graduated, accepted a partial scholarship to a Division III school, where he'd probably sit on the bench for 4 years before giving up football entirely. I should have been excited about the next season. With Edward gone, the starting spot should have been mine, but I knew better now. Sure enough, when we started spring practice, Coach Wilson announced that Dylan Garcia was moving from defense to offense full-time. Dylan's got the instincts, the athleticism, and the commitment we need at that position, Coach Wilson said during our team meeting. Cal, you'll be pushing him, keeping him sharp. Competition makes us all better. Competition. That word again, as if this was about competition. Dylan and I ran drills together that spring. He wasn't bad. He'd gotten better over the winter, worked on his catching, but I was still better. Measurably, obviously better. It didn't matter. One afternoon in late April, something happened that clarified everything. We were running a simple drill, route running, one-on-one against defensive backs. I ran a perfect comeback route, caught the pass in stride, turned upfield, and made the corner miss. It was textbook. Coach Wilson blew his whistle. "Calvin, stop." I stopped. "What was that?" "What was what, Coach?" "That route. You rounded it off. The cut wasn't sharp enough." I looked at him. "Coach, run it again, and this time plant and drive. Don't float through the break." I ran it again. This time, I made my cut so sharp I almost lost my balance. I caught the pass, turned upfield, whistle again. "Too sharp. You lost momentum. You need to find the balance." I stood there, the ball in my hands, and I understood what was happening. This wasn't coaching. This was something else. This was him showing me, showing everyone, that I could never get it right. I ran the route a third time. Perfect, absolutely perfect. I knew it, the other players knew it, the assistant coaches knew it. Coach Wilson just nodded. "Better, still needs work." Then Dylan ran the same route. He rounded the cut, barely got separation from the defender, caught the ball but had no yards after catch. "Good job, Dylan. That's the right tempo. See how he stayed smooth through the break? That's what I want to see." Some of the players looked confused. A few looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. After practice, I sat in my car in the parking lot. I didn't start it. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to understand what I was supposed to do with all of this. My phone buzzed. It was my father. "How was practice, Zar?" "Fine." "You okay? You sound off." "I'm fine, Dad." "Cal?" "I'm fine. I'll be home soon." I hung up before he could ask anything else, because if he asked the right question, I was going to break down completely, and I couldn't let that happen in the school parking lot. I drove home. My mother was working a night shift. My father was at the table, eating leftover spaghetti. "You hungry?" he asked. "No." He studied me. "Sit down for a minute." I sat. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "Cal," I looked at him. My father wasn't a man who talked about feelings. He worked, he provided, he showed up. But right now, he was looking at me like he could see something breaking. "Those cleats I bought you," I said. "I need you to return them." "What? Why?" "Because they didn't work. Because it was all bullshit. Because Coach Wilson was never going to start me. And making you spend money we don't have was just... It was cruel. It was me being stupid." My father was quiet for a long time. "You're not stupid, Hoyes," he said finally. "And those cleats are yours. You earned them." "I didn't earn anything." "You earned them by showing up every single day and working harder than anyone else on that team. That's earning it. What your coach does with that, that's on him, not you. It doesn't matter what I do, Dad. He's never going to..." My voice cracked. I stopped talking. My father reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. "Then you need to decide what this is about. Is it about playing football for Frank Wilson, or is it about something else?" "I don't know what else there is." "Then you need to figure that out." I went to my room. I lay on my bed. I pulled up my phone and started researching. College football, recruiting. What it actually took to get noticed by scouts. How scholarship offers worked. What Division I programs looked for in athletes. I read for hours. I took notes. I created spreadsheets, and I realized something. Coach Wilson didn't control my future. He controlled my present, my playing time at Lincoln High School, but he didn't control whether I could play in college. That was determined by completely different people: recruiters, scouts, college coaches who evaluated talent based on measurable data, not based on who your parents were. I needed to get in front of those people, and I needed to do it in a way that bypassed Frank Wilson entirely. The next day, I started filming myself. My father helped me. We set up his phone on a tripod, and I ran routes in our backyard, caught passes he threw me, ran sprints that he timed. We did this every day for 2 weeks until we had footage of me catching 50 passes, running a 4.4 40-yard dash, demonstrating every root in the tree. Then I edited the footage together on my laptop. I added my height, weight, GPA. I included my stats from the previous season, limited as they were. I made a 3-minute highlight reel. I researched every Division I, Division II, and Division III program within 500 miles. I found the names of their recruiting coordinators. I found their email addresses. And I sent my highlight reel to 73 different programs. I didn't tell Coach Wilson. I didn't ask for his help, his recommendation, his blessing. I went around him completely. At practice, I kept my head down. I ran the drills. I competed with Dylan for a starting spot I knew I'd never get, but now it felt different, because I knew this wasn't my whole world anymore. 3 weeks later, I got my first response. It was from a Division II school about 4 hours away. The assistant coach who handled recruiting for receivers wanted to know if I'd be interested in attending their summer camp. It cost $200 to attend, but it was a chance to be evaluated in person. I showed the email to my father. "Can we do this?" I asked. He looked at the cost. I saw him doing that math again, the math I'd learned to hate. "Yeah," he said, "we can do this." The camp was in June, right after school ended. I drove up with my father, 4 hours, through flat highway and endless farmland. The campus was small, nothing like the huge Division I schools I'd seen on TV, but it was clean, the facilities were decent, and when we arrived, there were already 50 other high school players there. The camp lasted 2 days. We ran drills, did one-on-ones, ran routes against defensive backs from the college team. The coaches watched everything, took notes, timed our 40s, measured our jumps. I performed, not perfectly. I was nervous, and some of the other players were good, really good, but I held my own. I ran a 4.4240. I caught almost everything thrown my way. I showed I could adjust to the ball, find the soft spots in coverage, make cuts at full speed. On the second day, the recruiting coordinator pulled me aside. "Calvin Wilson?" "Yes, sir. Actually, it's Calvin Smith. Wilson is my high school coach." He checked his notes. "Right, sorry. Cal Smith. You looked good out there." "Thank you, sir. What's your situation? Are you getting looks from other programs?" "I've reached out to a few schools. You're the first to respond." He nodded. "Your film is interesting. You don't have a lot of game stats." "I didn't play much last season. Why not?" This was the moment. I could make excuses, blame Coach Wilson, explain the whole ugly situation, or I could just keep it simple. "Depth chart politics," I said. "But I can play. I know I can." "I believe you," he said. "Here's what I can tell you. We're interested. We need receivers for our next class. If you keep developing, maintain your grades, and show up to a few more events, I think we could make something work." "What kind of something?" "Scholarship. Probably partial for the first year, depending on how many spots we fill. But if you develop the way I think you will, it could go to full. Are you interested?" Yes, sir, absolutely. He shook my hand. Good. Stay in touch. Send me your stats from this coming season. And Cal, don't let one coach define what you can do. The game is bigger than any one person. I drove home with my father that night, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real hope. Built on something concrete. When I got back, I didn't say anything to anyone at school. Not to Coach Wilson, not to the other players. I just showed up to summer conditioning, did the work, and waited. My junior season started. Dylan was the starting receiver. I was second string, same as always, but now I didn't care. Every game, every practice, I was collecting data, film, stats, evidence that I could play. Fourth game of the season, Dylan got suspended for 3 games. Academic violation, failed a test in a way that violated the school's eligibility rules. Coach Wilson had no choice but to start me. I caught 6 passes for 93 yards and a touchdown. We won. The next game, I caught 8 passes for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. The game after that, 7 catches, 104 yards. College scouts were starting to show up. Not for me, not yet. But they were there, watching our games, evaluating talent, and I was putting up numbers that were hard to ignore. When Dylan's suspension ended, Coach Wilson called me into his office. Cal, I want to talk to you about the next game. Okay. Dylan's eligible again. He's been working hard, staying after practice, really showing leadership. That's good. So I'm going to start him against Riverside, but I want you to know, you'll still get significant playing time. You've earned that. I looked at him. He actually seemed to believe what he was saying. He actually thought this was reasonable. Coach, I just put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in 3 games. I know. And you played well, but Dylan's a senior. He's been in the program longer. He deserves what? To take snaps away from someone who's clearly better? Coach Wilson's expression hardened. Watch your tone. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Coach. I'm just stating facts. I've outperformed Dylan in every measurable way. If you start him over me, it's not about football. It's about team chemistry. It's about respecting your upperclassmen. It's about understanding that football is bigger than individual stats. No, I said. It's about you making sure that the kids whose parents matter get what they want, even when they don't deserve it. The room went very quiet. Get out of my office, Coach Wilson said. Yes, sir. I left. I knew I'd just burned a bridge, but the bridge had already been burned. I just finally acknowledged it. That Friday, Dylan started. I played in the second half. We lost. After the game, Coach Wilson mentioned in his post-game talk that we needed to come together as a team and stop being selfish. Everyone knew he was talking about me. The next week in practice, I was getting fewer reps. Coach Wilson was freezing me out, subtly but clearly. When he explained plays, he'd look at Dylan. When he gave feedback, he'd focus on other receivers. When we ran drills, he'd pair me with third-string defensive backs. I didn't react. I just kept working. Because I knew something Coach Wilson didn't. I was getting out. This place, this team, this man's opinion of me, none of it mattered anymore. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the Division II school. They were offering me a partial scholarship, 60% of tuition, room, and board. If I performed well my freshman year, it could increase to full. I showed my parents. My mother cried. My father just nodded, like he'd known this was coming. You did this yourself, he said. You earned this. I didn't tell anyone else, not yet. I wanted to finish the season first. We were 6-4 with 2 games left. I was barely playing, maybe 15, 20 snaps a game. But when I did play, I produced. I ended the season with 37 catches, 548 yards, and 4 touchdowns, despite playing less than half the snaps. Dylan, who played 3 times as much as me, had 41 catches, 592 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The statistical difference was obvious, but it didn't matter. Our final game was senior night. Before the game, they honored all the seniors. Dylan and Edward and the others stood at midfield with their parents while the announcer read their names and their accomplishments. Coach Wilson stood with them, shaking hands, smiling for photos. I watched from the sideline, and I felt nothing. No anger, no resentment, just a cold, clear understanding of exactly how things worked. After the game, a win, our 7th of the season, the team gathered in the locker room. Coach Wilson gave a speech about the seniors, about their dedication, about what they'd meant to the program. Then he looked at the returning players. For those of you coming back next year, remember what you saw from these seniors. The commitment, the sacrifice, the willingness to put the team first. That's what makes a champion. I almost laughed. In the parking lot after, Joseph found me. Hey, I heard you got a scholarship offer. Division II, right? Where'd you hear that? Coach Lee mentioned it. I think he's happy for you. Probably the only coach who is. Yeah, probably. You going to take it? Already accepted it. Joseph grinned. Good. Get out of here. Go somewhere where they actually care about whether you can play. What about you? He shrugged. I'm not good enough for college ball, I know that. But I got other plans. Trade school probably. Electrician or HVAC. Something real. We shook hands and I realized he was one of the few people in this whole program I'd actually miss. My senior year started and everything changed. With Dylan graduated, Coach Wilson had no choice. I was the best receiver on the team, but he made sure I knew he wasn't happy about it. He criticized everything. My routes, my blocking, my attitude, nothing was ever good enough. If I caught a touchdown, he'd find something wrong with how I ran the route. If I blocked well, he'd say I wasn't getting enough separation in my routes. But I was putting up numbers, and scouts were noticing. By mid-season, I had Division I programs asking about me. Not the top tier, not Alabama or Ohio State or schools like that, but solid programs. Mid-major conferences, schools that could develop players and send them to the NFL. I scheduled visits. I took official trips. Coach Wilson was required to help with this process, to communicate with college coaches, to send out my transcripts and film. He did it. But he did it late, reluctantly, and with an attitude that made it clear he thought I didn't deserve any of it. One afternoon, a recruiter from a Division I program called the school to speak with Coach Wilson about me. I found out about it because Coach Lee mentioned it accidentally. Did Coach Wilson talk to you about the call from Western State? He asked. What call? Coach Lee's face went pale. Oh, I thought he would have mentioned it. When was this? 2 days ago. I went straight to Coach Wilson's office. Coach, did Western State call about me? He looked up from his desk. Yeah, they had some questions. And I answered them. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, that you're a talented player with some attitude issues, that you've had problems with team chemistry, that you're skilled but can be difficult to coach. I stood there, processing what I was hearing. You sabotaged me. I told them the truth, Calvin. If you don't like it, maybe you should think about how you conduct yourself. I show up every day. I work harder than anyone. I follow every rule. The only problem I've ever had is with you refusing to play me because my parents don't donate enough money. That's your interpretation, and frankly, this conversation is a perfect example of why college coaches need to know what they're getting with you. You've got talent, but you've also got a chip on your shoulder the size of Texas. I wanted to explode. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him exactly what I thought of him and his program and the way he treated me for 3 years. Instead, I smiled. You know what, Coach? You're right. I do have a chip on my shoulder, and I'm going to carry it with me to college, and I'm going to use it to become the best player I can possibly be. And one day, when you're still here coaching kids whose parents kiss your ass, I'm going to be somewhere you wish you could be, and you're going to remember this conversation. I walked out. That night, I called the recruiter from Western State myself. I explained what had happened, what Coach Wilson had said, and why he'd said it. The recruiter was quiet for a moment. Let me ask you something, Cal. Is any of what he said true? No, sir. I didn't think so. Your film speaks for itself, and honestly, we've dealt with Coach Wilson before. We know his type. Don't worry about it. 2 weeks later, Western State offered me a full scholarship. I committed immediately. The rest of my senior season was strange. Coach Wilson knew I was leaving, knew I'd gotten a scholarship despite his best efforts to prevent it. He couldn't freeze me out. I was too important to the team, but he could make practices miserable. He did. But I didn't care anymore. Every drill, every practice, every game was just time I had to burn before I could leave. We finished 9-3, made the playoffs, lost in the first round. I ended the season with 78 catches, 1,137 yards, and 9 touchdowns. At the senior banquet, Coach Wilson gave a speech about our class. He mentioned several players by name, talked about their contributions, their character, their futures. He mentioned me once, said I was talented but still had a lot to learn about being a team player. I sat at a table with my parents and smiled, because it didn't matter. None of it mattered anymore. After the banquet, Coach Lee pulled me aside. Cal, I just want to say, I'm sorry. For what? For not standing up for you more. I saw what was happening, and I should have said something. I should have pushed back. It's okay, Coach. It's not, though. You deserve better than what you got here. I shrugged. Maybe. But I got what I needed. I got out. He nodded. Good luck at Western State. I'll be watching. I graduated in June, spent the summer training, getting ready for college football. My parents drove me to campus in August, helped me move into the dorms. My mother cried when they left. My father shook my hand. Make it count, he said. I will. College was everything high school wasn't. The coaches evaluated you based on what you could do, not who your parents were. The competition was fierce. Everyone there was talented. Everyone had been a star at their high school. But it was fair. I redshirted my first year, which was common for freshmen. I practiced with the team, learned the system, got stronger in the weight room. My second year, I played special teams and got occasional snaps at receiver. Caught 18 passes, 240 yards. My third year, I started. 71 catches, 933 yards, 7 touchdowns. My fourth year, I was all conference. 89 catches, 1,212 yards, 11 touchdowns. NFL scouts started showing up. They liked my speed, my route running, my hands. But I was from a mid-major conference, and there were questions about whether I could compete at the next level. I got invited to the combine, ran a 4.38 40-yard dash, posted a 40-inch vertical jump, caught everything thrown at me. I was drafted in the 5th round by an NFL team. My parents were at the draft. When my name was called, my mother screamed. My father just smiled, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time in my life. The NFL was brutal. I spent my first 2 years mostly on the practice squad, getting occasional call-ups to the active roster. But I was learning, developing, getting better. My third year, I made the active roster full-time. Caught 32 passes, 380 yards, 2 touchdowns. My fourth year, I had a breakout season. 67 catches, 894 yards, 6 touchdowns. My fifth year, I signed a new contract. 3 years, $12 million. I was set. Financially secure in a way my parents never had been. I bought them a house, a real house, new, in a good neighborhood. Paid off all their debt. Set up accounts so they'd never have to worry about money again. And I kept playing. Kept getting better. I played 8 years in the NFL. I was never a superstar. Never led the league in any major category. Never made a Pro Bowl. But I was solid. Reliable. The kind of player coaches loved because you knew exactly what you were going to get. I made smart financial decisions, invested carefully, saved aggressively. When I retired at 30, I had $18 million in the bank and no debt. Most retired players struggled with what came next. Not me. I'd always known football was temporary. I'd been preparing for the next phase since college. I got my MBA while I was still playing, taking online classes in the off-season. After retirement, I started investing in businesses. Small stuff at first, restaurants, local franchises, real estate. I was good at it, really good. The same instincts that helped me read defenses helped me read markets, evaluate opportunities, spot gaps. Within 3 years, I'd doubled my net worth. Within 5 years, I'd tripled it. I started a private equity firm that focused on acquiring and developing mid-sized businesses. We specialized in turning around struggling companies, streamlining operations, improving profitability. It was aggressive work. We'd identify companies that were underperforming, buy them for less than they were worth, restructure them, and either hold them for long-term returns or flip them for profit. I was 38 when my firm acquired a sports marketing company based in my home state. It was a decent-sized operation, managed about 40 professional athletes, helped them with endorsements, appearances, financial planning. We were doing our due diligence, reviewing their client list, when I saw a familiar name, Frank Wilson. He wasn't an athlete. He was listed as a consultant. According to the files, he'd retired from coaching 5 years earlier and was now working as a consultant for high school athletic programs, helping them develop their football programs, advising on recruiting, strategy, training. The sports marketing company handled his bookings, managed his speaking engagements, coordinated his consulting contracts. I pulled up more information. He was making decent money, not huge, but solid, enough to live comfortably. The company had him scheduled for about 20 engagements a year at $5,000 to $10,000 per engagement. I sat in my office and stared at that file for a long time, 20 years. It had been 20 years since I'd sat on that bench in those worn-out cleats, watching Dylan Garcia drop passes while I rotted on the sideline. I'd built a good life since then, a great life. I was wealthy, successful, respected in my field. I'd proven every single thing Frank Wilson had said about me wrong. But seeing his name in that file brought everything back. Not the anger that had faded years ago. What came back was something colder, a clarity about exactly who he was and what he'd done. My CFO, Margaret Taylor, no relation to any of my high school teammates, knocked on my office door. "Cal, we need to make a decision about the sports marketing acquisition. The board wants to move forward, but we need your sign-off. What's the company worth? We're buying it for $8 million. Fair market value is probably closer to 10, but they're motivated sellers. Cash flow is solid. Client list is good. Management is competent. What's their biggest vulnerability? She checked her notes. Retention. They've lost a few major clients recently. Nothing catastrophic, but it's a concern. If they lose a few more, the valuation drops significantly. And if we acquired them, we'd have full control over personnel, client management, strategic direction. Yes, standard acquisition. We'd own it outright. I nodded. Move forward with the purchase. We closed the deal 6 weeks later. I now owned the company that managed Frank Wilson's consulting career. I didn't do anything immediately. I let the company run as it had been, made a few strategic improvements, stabilized the client base. I wanted to understand the business completely before making any changes. 3 months after the acquisition, I reviewed every consultant and client personally. When I got to Frank Wilson's file, I read it carefully. He was 62 years old. He'd retired from coaching after 35 years, the last 28 at Lincoln High School. His record there had been respectable. Several playoff appearances, a few conference championships, nothing spectacular. After retirement, he'd started consulting. He was good at it. He knew the game, knew how to talk to coaches and administrators, knew how to build programs. His client satisfaction scores were high. The company had him under contract for another 2 years. After that, he'd be a free agent, able to work with anyone. Most of his income came from this consulting work. He had a pension from teaching, some savings, but at 62, he needed to work for at least a few more years to fully fund his retirement. I called the president of the sports marketing division into my office. Her name was Emma Moore, again, no relation to anyone from my past. Emma, I want to talk about Frank Wilson. She pulled up his file on her tablet. Good consultant, solid bookings, clients like him. Why? I want you to start reducing his engagements. She looked confused. Why? He's profitable, good margins. I understand, but I want you to start declining bookings for him. Nothing dramatic. Just start saying he's not available. Reduce his engagements from 20 a year to 15, then to 10. Make it gradual. Cal, I don't understand. This doesn't make business sense. It makes sense to me, and I own the company. She was quiet for a moment. Is there a personal issue here? Yes. Do you want to tell me what it is? No, she nodded. Okay, I'll do it, but you should know, he's going to notice. And when his contract is up, he's going to leave. That's fine. Over the next 8 months, Frank Wilson's bookings decreased. 15 engagements became 12, became 8. His income dropped proportionally. 6 months before his contract was set to expire, he called Emma's office asking to meet. She called me first. Frank Wilson wants to discuss his contract renewal. What do you want me to do? Set up the meeting. I'll take it. You're going to meet with him personally? Yes. She was quiet. Cal, I've worked for you for 3 years. You've never personally met with a consultant. What's going on? Just set up the meeting. Frank Wilson came to our office on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The receptionist showed him to the conference room. I watched him on the security camera for a moment before going in. He'd aged. His hair was completely gray now, thinner. He'd put on weight, moved a little slower. But he still had that same presence, that way of occupying space like he owned it. I walked into the conference room. He looked up and smiled, extending his hand. Mr. Smith, thank you for taking the time to meet with... He stopped. His hand was still extended, but his expression had changed. Recognition, confusion, then something else. Calvin? Hello, Coach Wilson? He stared at me. I I didn't realize you own this company? I do. He slowly lowered his hand. Well, this is unexpected. I sat down. Please sit. He sat, but he looked uncomfortable now, uncertain. This was new for him, being the one off balance. I understand you wanted to discuss your contract, I said. Yes, my current contract expires in 6 months, and I wanted to talk about renewal. But I've noticed over the past year that my bookings have declined significantly. I was hoping to understand why. Your bookings declined because I instructed the company to reduce them. Why? Do you remember me, Coach? Of course. You played for me at Lincoln. You were a good player. I was a great player. I was better than almost everyone on that team. But you barely played me for 3 years. He shifted in his seat. Calvin, that was 20 years ago, high school football. I made the decisions I thought were best for the team. No, you made the decisions that were best for you. You played the kids whose parents mattered, whose families donated money, who looked the way you thought a Lincoln player should look. Talent didn't matter. Performance didn't matter. What mattered was whether we fit into your vision of what the program should be. That's not fair. I had to consider a lot of factors. You told me to buy new cleats. Do you remember that? He blinked. What? You told me my cleats weren't good enough, that they sent the wrong message, that if I was serious about football, I needed to invest in proper equipment. My family couldn't afford new cleats, but my father picked up overtime shifts so he could buy me the ones you wanted. $240. That was a lot of money for us. Calvin, I don't remember. I wore those cleats to practice. You nodded at me. Said it was good to see me taking things seriously. And then you kept me on the bench anyway, because the cleats were never the point. The point was making me prove that I knew my place. Frank Wilson was quiet. He looked older now, smaller. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want you to understand something. When you're a coach, when you're in a position of power over kids who are desperate to prove themselves, every decision you make matters. Every word you say matters. You shaped how I saw myself, how I saw the world. You taught me that effort doesn't matter, that talent doesn't matter, that the only thing that matters is whether you're born into the right family. I never meant, I know you didn't mean it. That's almost worse. You didn't set out to hurt me. You just made decisions based on what was convenient for you, what kept the boosters happy, what made your life easier, and you never thought about what it cost the kids who didn't fit into that system. He looked down at the table. I'm sorry. If I made mistakes with you, I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. He looked up. Then what do you want? Your contract expires in 6 months. We're not renewing it. What? Why? Because I don't want to. Because I own this company, and I get to make decisions about who I do business with, and I have decided I don't want to do business with you. Calvin, this is my livelihood. I need this income. My pension isn't enough to. Then you'll need to find work somewhere else. I'm sure there are other marketing companies that would be happy to represent you. You know it's not that simple. I've built relationships through your company. My clients know me through this company. Starting over at 62 is difficult, I know, but you'll figure it out. You're resourceful. You'll find a way. He stared at me. This is revenge. No, revenge would be actively trying to destroy your career. I'm not doing that. I'm simply choosing not to help you. There's a difference. This will ruin me financially. I need to work for at least 3 more years to have a comfortable retirement. Then you'll need to work somewhere else. He stood up, his face red. You think you're teaching me a lesson? You think this makes you some kind of hero? I think this makes us even. We're not even, Calvin. I was your coach. I made decisions I thought were right. Maybe I made mistakes, but I was trying to run a program. You're doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because I can, the same reason you kept me on the bench, Because I have the power and you don't, and that's all that matters." He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He just grabbed his jacket and walked out. I sat in the conference room for a long time after he left. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and empty, and like I'd just done something that couldn't be undone. Emma came in a few minutes later. He looked upset. "Yeah. What did you tell him? Did you tell that we're not renewing his contract?" She sat down. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Was this worth it?" I didn't answer immediately. "I don't know yet." Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as Frank Wilson tried to rebuild his consulting career. He reached out to other sports marketing companies, but most of them weren't interested. He was older, his client base was established through my company, and without those connections, he didn't have much to offer. He took a few independent gigs, one-off consulting jobs that paid poorly. His income dropped by about 70%. I heard through contacts that he'd had to downsize his house, that his wife had gone back to work part-time, that they were struggling. I waited for satisfaction to arrive, for the sense that I'd finally gotten justice for what he'd done to me. It didn't come. What came instead was a kind of hollowness, because I realized something I should have understood earlier. Hurting Frank Wilson didn't undo what he'd done to me. It didn't give me back those 3 years of high school. It didn't erase the humiliation, the self-doubt, the feeling that I wasn't good enough. All it did was prove that I could be just as indifferent to someone else's suffering as he'd been to mine. About a year after our meeting, I got an email. It was from Coach Walter Lee, the assistant coach from Lincoln who'd been kind to me. "Cal, I hope this email finds you well. I'm reaching out because I heard you had a business conflict with Coach Wilson. I don't know the details, and I'm not asking about them, but I wanted you to know that Frank had a heart attack last week. He's okay. He's recovering, but it was serious. I thought you'd want to know. I hope life is treating you well. You earned everything you achieved. Coach Lee." I read the email 3 times, then I closed my laptop and sat at my desk, looking out the window at the city skyline. A heart attack. Stress, probably. Financial pressure, probably. The weight of knowing that his last few years before retirement were going to be difficult, probably. I could have felt guilty. Part of me thought I should, but mostly I just felt tired. I thought about calling him, about checking in, about maybe even finding a way to reverse what I'd done. But I didn't, because that would be dishonest. It would be pretending that I'd changed my mind, that I regretted the decision. I didn't regret it. I'd made my choice. He'd made his choices 20 years ago. We both had to live with the consequences. Frank Wilson recovered. He kept working, kept consulting, but at a much reduced level. He never approached my company again, never reached out to me personally, and I never reached out to him. Years passed. My company grew. I acquired more businesses, made more money, built more wealth. I got married to a woman I met at a charity event, Abigail Hall, a nonprofit director who worked with underprivileged kids. We had 2 children. Life was good. By any objective measure, I'd succeeded beyond what most people could imagine. But sometimes, late at night, I'd think about Frank Wilson, about our last conversation, about the look on his face when he realized I held his career in my hands. I'd think about what I could have done differently. I could have helped him. I could have used my position to extend his contract, increase his bookings, set him up for a comfortable retirement. I could have been the bigger person, but I wasn't. And I couldn't quite decide if that made me weak or strong. My father visited me one weekend when I was 45. We were sitting on my back porch, watching my kids play in the yard. He'd retired years earlier, was living comfortably on the money I'd given him and my mother. "You ever think about high school?" he asked. "Sometimes. Why?" "I ran into someone from town last week. They mentioned Frank Wilson, said he's working part-time at a sporting goods store, doing equipment repairs. Apparently, he never really recovered financially after his consulting work dried up." I didn't say anything. "They said you two had some kind of business falling out." "We did." My father was quiet for a moment. "You want to tell me about it?" "Not really." "Okay." He watched my kids for a moment. "You know what I remember most about your high school years?" "What?" "How hard you worked, how much you wanted it, how you'd come home from practice, and I could see in your face that something was wrong, but you'd never quit. You'd just work harder. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You chose to keep going. That took something." "Yeah." He looked at me. "Did you do something to Frank Wilson?" I met his eyes. "Yeah." "Did he deserve it?" I thought about that. I thought he did. "And now?" "I don't know." My father nodded. "That's honest, at least." We sat there in silence for a while. "You know what I learned working at the mill for 30 years, he said finally. "What?" "That the men who got ahead weren't always the hardest workers. Sometimes they were, but not always. Sometimes they were the guys who knew the right people, who said the right things, who played the game the right way. And I could have been angry about that, could have spent my whole life bitter. But you didn't. No, because being bitter doesn't change anything. It just eats you from the inside." "What are you saying, Dad?" "I'm saying that whatever you did to Frank Wilson, you had your reasons. You earned the right to make that decision. But you also need to know that carrying that decision around, that changes you. And you need to decide if you're okay with that." I looked at my kids, playing in the yard, completely unaware of any of this. They were growing up in a different world than I had. A world where they'd never worry about whether they could afford the right equipment, whether their parents mattered enough, whether they'd get a fair shot. I'd built that world for them, but I'd also built it by becoming someone who could look a man in the eye and take away his livelihood without flinching. "I don't know if I'm okay with it," I said. "Then you need to figure that out." I never did figure it out, not completely. Frank Wilson lived another 12 years. I never spoke to him again. He never reached out to me. When he died at 74, I saw the obituary in the paper. I didn't go to the funeral. I told myself it was because I didn't belong there, because my presence would be inappropriate, because it would hurt his family. But the truth was simpler. I didn't want to face what I'd done. Because here's the thing about revenge, about getting even, about finally having power over someone who once had power over you. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. It doesn't heal the wounds. It doesn't make you whole. It just makes you someone who hurt another person because you could, and you have to carry that forever. I'm 60 now. My children are grown. My company is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I've achieved everything I set out to achieve and more. But sometimes, late at night, I think about a 16-year-old kid in worn-out cleats, sitting on a bench, watching other kids play a game he was better at than any of them. And I think about a 62-year-old man, sitting in a conference room, realizing that his career was about to end because someone he'd wronged 20 years earlier had finally gotten the chance to return the favor. And I wonder if there was a better way, if I could have been strong enough to let it go, to be the person I wanted to be rather than the person Frank Wilson taught me to be. I don't have an answer. What I have is money, success, power, and a lifetime of memories that include both my greatest achievements and my ugliest moments. I won. By any objective measure, I won. But winning didn't change me back into the kid who believed that hard work and talent were enough, That kid died on a bench in a high school locker room, wearing expensive cleats that didn't matter. What's left is someone harder, colder, more successful, and infinitely more alone with his choices than he ever thought he'd be. That's the cost, and I paid it willingly. Stories like this happen more often than we think. Subscribe if you want to hear the ones that usually stay unspoken. And if this story made you pause, a like helps the channel grow.